Hello and welcome to week 4 um, of Level 3 Health and Social Care, Unit 307, Dementia. And this is part 8, the second set of slides in week 4, support for relatives and carers of people at end-stage dementia. So in our last set of slides, we talked about what sort of support we would give the individual who is at end-stage dementia. And now we're going to have a little bit of a look about how would you support the relatives and carers of that person, because supporting them is equally as important at end of life stage. And at the end of these sets of slides, I'll talk you through the assignment and just highlight some things I want you to remember. Okay. So the objective that we're focusing on here is the last objective in your assignment, and that's objective 3.4. Explain the support available for families with relatives at the end stage of dementia. So from family to carers. So carers often speak about being a husband, a wife, a mother and a son and a grandchild first. They don't always think of themselves as a carer. That sort of comes a bit later when someone's illness or disability occurs. And sometimes it might not be a role that they expected to do or plan to do. So this session is really providing advice about supporting that people. Being a carer may be an additional role that develops, but it doesn't really replace those roles and relationships that families have lived with for years. So, if you're a daughter, you're still a daughter. And the way that you interact with the person that you're caring for will still be in that way. So we as professionals just need to remember what the sort of mother-daughter relationships that have been going on, mother-granddaughter relationships, those sorts of things. We need to be aware of them, husband-wife relationships. Be sensitive to them. So when we as professionals we start working with a family, it's really remembering what I've just said, but also know that there are some profound changes which really can affect that relationship and can affect how the person feels about the person they're caring for. And they can generate all sorts of difficult feelings, these physical and emotional changes. They can have feelings of guilt, have we done enough? Have we done it right? Did we do the right thing in the early years? Should we have done what we did? Did we make the right decisions? It could be depression, the thought of losing, a loved one, especially a spouse. That's, you know, it's very hard for sometimes for people to deal with that. They can resent them for leaving them as well. Like, how am I going to go on with life when you're not there? They can be angry. Why is it happening to me? Why is it happening to my partner? Why is it happening to my mother? I'm not ready. And they can feel isolated. Some people may even give up work to look after the person they're caring for. And they can become isolated from normal everyday life as well. So we need to think about that. And of course, there's a level of stress. Am I doing it right? Am I looking after someone right? Am I, letting them down? Huge amount of worries. And as a professional support, you need to be super sensitive to these things. Even if someone has moved into, say, the care home that you're working in, and maybe may have handed over quite a large part of that caring work to you, they can still feel terrible about making that decision. And you've got to be super sensitive to that. So, one of the most powerful feelings that people experience when someone close to them develops dementia is a series of loss and grief. They actually start the feelings of loss and grief. Maybe it can be many years before the person dies, because in a way, when dementia starts to affect the way the person interacts, where they behave, their personality, people are already getting that loss, especially particularly important, between spouses, really. It's a real loss of a relationship. They may have relied on the person to do things. And carers might not always recognize these strong feelings when the person is very much alive. So what sort of things? Take a moment just to think before I go on. What could that carer be grieving for? I've given you some ideas. Maybe just take a moment before I go on to jot down your ideas. Take some time or press a pause and then jot down some thoughts. Okay. So they may grieve for the person they once knew, the future that they had planned, the things they were going to do, the relationship that they shared, the sort of love, the feelings, that companionship, support, or special understanding, and their own freedom to work, as I just said, or to go out and do their gym classes, or to go out dancing like they used to, those sorts of things. And sometimes finances as well, because if people have to give up work, they lose huge amount of income, and it's sort of things, a lifestyle that they took for granted, they may not have. So be sensitive for that. Many carers blame themselves if things go wrong in a caring situation. When they can't understand what the person with dementia is trying to say, they can blame themselves for not being good enough. If a person with dementia becomes ill, if they can't resolve the problem, they can get very, very stressed. So you need to be, again, super sensitive to things like that. Give them lots and lots of support. Think about the language that you use with them. Don't be critical of them. That won't help them. And as I said, when people move into a care home, you think this will resolve the stress, but that's not always the case, because they can actually carry around a huge amount of guilt. Just be sensitive that this can also, because they're feeling a lot of guilt, this can sometimes come out as a criticism of the care that you provide as well. So just be a bit sensitive that they're not really feeling that. It's just, you know, because they can't provide it anymore, they have to make sure that you're providing the best that you can, because they feel guilty that it's not them. That's a difficult situation, but I've never yet worked in a care home where we haven't come across at least one relative who sort of picks up on everything that doesn't quite go right in the care home with their parents. Oh, well, if it was me, I wouldn't have done it like that. Why did you do that? And they're quite critical. Just you need to step back and roll with it a little bit, because it's them dealing with their guilt very often, and they're not actually meaning to be critical of you as well. But I know that can feel hard when you're on the receiving end. So by the time the person with dementia is near the end of their life, hopefully carers have got some good practical support networks. They might have professionals already involved. You might, as a professional, might be working in home care. So you might have been working with that person for a long time. Or as I said, you could be working in a care home, and they might have had their social worker may have helped get them into your care home. However, sometimes there are some questions that they never wanted to ask their loved ones, and they didn't feel able to get as prepared, because they just felt it really hard to ask those questions. If someone's got an advanced care plans or advanced decision, it's really, really helpful, and it can give lots of clarity later on down the line. So it's important to try to get them to discuss this. And again, sometimes it's better that the professional takes over that discussion, but keeping the family involved, because they can find it incredibly difficult to say, look, when you've got dementia, when you're in the dying stages, you want to do this, this, and this. Some people find that really difficult, so they would avoid it. But good skilled staff can really, really help with this. So in the final stages, we know that people might not be able to recognise and communicate with their family very well. They often lose their ability with language. And although this relationship seems that it's nearly over, people can find it difficult to mourn completely, because the person's still alive and still there. They're just sort of hanging there a little bit. Things that you can suggest that they may help is, again, we talked earlier about setting up playlists of music. That's something that the family can do, or maybe the younger members of the family are involved who are better with technology, can actually put it together. And that means they feel that they've had a contribution. You could just encourage them to do some gentle touch with somebody, hand massages, just setting, that the gentle arms, squeezing the hand gently, stroking hands and arms. They can do that if the person can't communicate with them, and then they know they're actually doing something constructive for them. Making adjustments to the care environment, bringing in little things from the home, bringing in some nice pictures, things that they like, using aromatherapy, nice family photos, maybe a favourite ornament, a few favourite ornaments. They may already have that in their care home room, but there's still room for the family to sort of change things for them. Not too much, but bringing in other things, really. Looking at lighting, and make sure when you've got someone who's at end stage, when the family are going to want to be there quite a lot, make sure that the room is conducive to them being in there. Make sure there's a couple of chairs, not just one, okay, so that someone doesn't have to stand around. And make sure these are comfortable chairs, not just horrible ones that are from the canteen or something like that. Because they really, really need to be supported. And sometimes they'll be sitting there for a long time. So some, nice little cushions and that for them to be comfortable. Make sure that the lights can be adjusted, because you can change the lighting down to softer lighting so that you can have lights on. Or maybe people often like to bring in little side lamps, because people will, you may need the lights on if you're doing a procedure with somebody, but very often they don't have to sit under glaring lights. So bringing in some little table lamps and that sort of thing can be quite good, or with darker shades. Take some time out to talk to the family as well, to acknowledge their presence when they come in, and maybe have a little chat with them before they go. They will appreciate it. So one of the best things we can do, as I said, is to support carers, is to get them to talk about their feelings, and this is particularly true at the end of life. Some care homes will have a carers group who might like to get together. They might get together once every so many weeks, and they can talk about some of the difficulties of supporting someone who's in the care home. That's really not unusual, really. They may need to see the mental health nurse themselves, and you might have to help them get into contact with somebody. Or they might you might be able to encourage them to go to other groups in the area, like an age concern group or a Dementia UK group, because they can be really helpful too, and they can talk to other people who've been in this situation. Another avenue of support in the UK, it is a bit limited, is Admiral Nursing Service, and they are really amazing. They are mental health nurses who specialise in dementia, and they provide a fantastic service. They are a bit of a charity though, so you can't guarantee that they're in every town in that respect. And they give loads and loads of information, and there are terrific websites that you could also help the carer find. Again, Age Concern, Age UK, the Alzheimer's Society is absolutely brilliant as well. Lots of information, and they have lots of local groups too. So they may not know about these things. You in the care home, you should always have access to this information. Maybe you could get a project for one of the care home staff is to actually get all this information together, so you have it at your fingertips whenever you need it. But they may look to the carer may look to you for advice and direction, so you can direct them into these places. So coping after a person dies, each person is very different. Each individual is very different. Some carers find that they grieve so much during the course of the illness that actually when the person dies, they sort of run out of feelings almost. And that's not unusual. I've come across that. And, some people may think, oh gosh, they didn't really care that much, but that isn't true. It's just that they've actually had their grieving process while the person's alive. So just be aware of it. And other people have all sorts of a range of reactions. So just take a moment to think before I go on about the sort of reactions somebody might have after the person that they care about has died, be it be it a spouse, be it a mother or a father, be you a grandchild of them, or even just a very good family friend. Have a think about the sorts of reactions that people might have. Jot down some ideas, and then when you're ready, you can go on and listen to me telling you my ideas. Okay. So they can feel numb, as though they haven't got any feelings, or their feelings are sort of frozen in place. They find it difficult to accept the situation, so they have shock and pain, even if it's been expected for a long time. When the person actually dies, that pain can come. But they can also feel relief, both for the person and for themselves, that their life might have been on hold for a while, and they can actually move on with their lives, and the person is at peace and not in pain or discomfort anymore. It's not unusual for someone to feel relief, and then sometimes they can feel guilty about it as well. They can feel angry, again, as I said earlier, that people have been taken maybe too soon, they feel. Guilt over something that happened in the past. It's the amount of families that I've come across that when someone actually does die, they suddenly get fixated on something they didn't do, which can actually be quite trivial. But they're like, oh my God, if only I'd have done that, everything would have been so much better. And you've got to work really carefully with them. And it's very important that when somebody dies is that you do set aside some time with the family, as a key worker, or maybe one of the supervisors might choose to do it. Depends how your home works. But you do need to set a time. Just let them blab for a minute, for a while, get some stuff off their chest. Carers can find it could take a long time to come to terms with the person's death, especially people who've been caring for quite a long time, for a few years, but they've given up their jobs and their only role has become caring. They get very focused on their caring role, and by necessity, for a few years, they might not have been able to do anything else, go out socially, go to work. So there can be this big hole. Sometimes if they've moved into a care home, it will at least come in steps, so that when they're with you, that person can start to try, and put a life into train. So hopefully they've been doing that. But other times, if someone's been at home and they've been caring, and even with your support, that big hole in the room is a very big hole. So people can be cut off. They might have lost their friends. They might have no more social contacts, and they don't really know what to do with themselves. So be prepared for that, and again, give them time to express themselves. And you can always give them some ideas about what they sort of could do. But I think if you're worried, you might need to identify it with their social worker or their mental health professional, or even the GP. Okay, so that's all really there is to support carers. Um, in your extra reading, I've placed a carers needs activity, a little case study that I'd like you to take some time over. I've added it there, and there's some questions for you to follow, and I want you to make some notes to make sure that you've truly thought it through, about what you need to do for carers. Okay, so before you go on to look at your assignment, maybe do that carers needs activity and consolidate some of the things that I've been saying to you. Okay. Okay, now we're moving on to looking at the assignment. In extra reading, I've given you another piece of what the research says about end of life care. So that's something for you to have a read with as well. And I've given you kind of nice little video about managing dignity in end of life care. So please have a watch of that as well before you go on to look at your assignment. Okay, so let's have a look at the assignment task. So there's 3 tasks in this assignment. Task 1 is 400 words. And it's focusing about the causes and effects of dementia, really. So 1.1, you need to discuss the reasons for an increase in dementia in the population. So you need to go right back to the first set of slides, think about why, and keep it focused. Why the reasons that dementia has increased in the population. And if you want to put some statistics in to help your answer, that will be good. So again, you want to put some research into this, really, if you want a decent grade. Okay, so what are the reasons for the increase in dementia? Is it an aging population? That's one of the answers. Is something happening in different countries? Let me know about that. You've got 400 words for the whole of task 1. The second part of task 1 is 1.2 to explain the signs and symptoms of dementia. Now, there is quite a lot to say about this, so I would suggest that you make 1.1 a bit smaller because there isn't so much to say about that, and then you could put a bit more energy into 1.2. Okay, with the signs and symptoms, you need to summarize because there's an awful lot. Okay, that's a whole set of slides. So what you might want to do is to break it up into the 3 levels, signs and symptoms, or just focus on the early stages of dementia, but give me the different, Alzheimer's, Lewy body, frontotemporal. Show me that you've looked up at those different ones. Okay, don't just give me all the signs and symptoms that are similar. I want you to break it down with the different types of dementia. Okay, and if you don't do that, then the grade will only be of a certain level. If you give me all the different types, but you need to summarize the language. Okay, because you've only got so many words and there's a lot to say. Okay, don't forget citations. I'll go over that again. If you're unsure of your Harvard referencing, if you're new to it, do use a Harvard referencing guide before you submit. Okay. Okay, task 2, you've got 200 words for this. Compare and contrast the available investigations associated with a diagnosis. Now, go back to where I've looked at the different types of investigations. That was in week 2. But remember to compare and contrast. So you're thinking of there's psychological investigations, there's physical investigations, there's scans, there's all sorts of things. Again, you're going to need to summarize. You've only got 200 words, but I do not want a list of just different investigations. You have to put some comparison in. Okay, you have to tell me why one is different to the other. Is one more effective than the other? Is one used in certain circumstances and not in others? So what are they used for? Why are they different? Okay, again, if you just give me a list of the available investigations and you don't contrast them, you don't show me where the differences are, then you'll only get a certain mark. You won't get a higher mark. Okay, the final task, task 3, is all 4 criteria from section 3. So really covers what we've been doing this week. Okay, and a bit of last week. So first of all, explain the treatment and support available for service users when initially diagnosed with dementia. So go back to your week 3 slides. Pay attention to what it says. It's only asking what sort of things do you do for people when they're initially diagnosed. So they're only in the first stage of dementia. So there's no point talking about stuff that happens at the end of life. We only want you to talk about when they've just been diagnosed. What support can you give to people, and be specific? Okay. You've got 400 words. You can write 100 words on each answer, probably. It's a good idea. So be very judicious in what you put in and make sure you focus on the question. So, week 3 slides explain the treatment and support when initially diagnosed. So, do not talk about any long-term stuff. 3.2, discuss the long-term complications. That was another set of slides. Moving on, so that's when we're talking really about the middle stages of dementia. What are the long-term complications? And again, summarize that. There was quite a lot of information. You're going to have to pick up the best bits you can. Okay. And then 3.3 and 3.4 are information taken from the slides that we've done this week. So the slides you've looked at today and the slides that you've been looking at before. Okay. So 3.3 is very focused on end stages. So think it about end of life care, what we did in the part 7 slides. Okay. So give me a summary of what sort of treatment and support. And again, there's a lot of information there. So pick out some of the stuff you're doing for service users. You don't need to talk too much about families and carers in 3.3 because you're going to talk about it in 3.4. So don't repeat yourself. 3.3 is about what you do for service users. So just focus on that. You've only got about 100 words, so you've got to really focus on summarizing that. 3.4 is what support do you give the families? What have we been talking about in this last set of slides that I've gone through with you? So again, in 3.4, you don't really need to talk about the service user because you've already answered it in 3.3. If you start flowing from one to the other, I will reduce your marks. You need to stay focused on the individuals here. Okay. So what do you do as a healthcare professional for families and relatives with end stage of dementia? Think about the sort of types of support that you're giving them. Okay. You know you can WhatsApp me if you're unsure. If you're not sure, if you think you're not quite getting the question right and you want to check something out, please, just WhatsApp me and I will answer you. Okay. Do remember your citations. Do remember your referencing. It's a huge mark to lose. And also it affects one of the other marks when you show me your application. So anytime, try to bring in some research, try to bring in something else. Make sure your references are Harvard standard. And if you're still unsure, please check the Harvard guide. I put it up again for you a couple of weeks ago. I put a new version up for you. And if you're really not sure about it, then there's a little PowerPoint that goes with it for you to work through. But don't forget your citations. Really do your best you can. I don't want no referencing at all. I don't want you to refer just to my slides. I want you to find other things as well. You can certainly reference stuff that I've given you in extra reading, no problem with that. But I don't want you just to reference my slides. So if you're putting in a piece of information, you need to find another reference for it from your research and from your reading. Okay. Again, if you're not sure, check it out with me. It's always better for you to ask a question before you hand in from me and than me having to tell you after I've marked it and then I mark you down. So if you're really unsure, please check with me. Okay, that's all there is. That is the end of Health and Social Care Unit 307, the Dementia Unit. We've finished that unit now. Okay. And I will say goodbye until I see you again.